I went through Rettendon the later part of 1995. I remember an occasion when I was there with other people. They were Jack Womes and Michael Steele. I remember that day. I was working at Sunbury-on-Thames. I had my mobile phone with me. Michael Steele rang me that day. He wondered where I was, and he said he'd like to meet me. We did not discuss where we would meet because I was at work. I agreed to meet him later on that day at Ron Parkinson's Motorcycles at Mark's Tate at 5 p.m. I drove to Mark's Tate and I think my Golf convertible. I've been to Ron Parkinson's before. It sells motorcycles. When I arrived, I parked in the flats opposite. Mr. Steele wasn't there when I arrived. When I arrived, I went into the motorbike shop. I bought something for my old motorbike. It was either a battery or a light bulb. And then I put it in my car. Whilst I was walking back to my car, I saw Mick. I waved to him and said I was just putting something in my car. And then I got in his pickup truck. The pickup truck was a red Toyota, M registration. When I got in, I sat in the passenger seat. He said they were going down to do a deal with Pat, him and Jack. I said, "Where is Jack?" He said, "He'll be here in a minute." I don't recall anything else he said. Then I noticed Jack had pulled up behind us. Jack was in a beige Volkswagen. It was a B registration. I had sold this car to Michael Steele. When he pulled up, he got out and spoke to Mick. I don't really recall what he said. Then he got back in his car. Then we pulled off onto the A12 heading towards London. I was with Mick in his Toyota and Jack behind us in his Volkswagen. I can't recall exactly what was said, but he said we would meet Pat and there was going to be a drug deal, or we were having a drug deal, I can't remember. At that time, I didn't know where we were going. Mick said Jack would show me where the deal was going to be. He said, "Did I know the place?" I said, "No." He said, "Don't worry, Jack will show you." Nothing happened on the journey, just normal chat. He told me I was going to swap cars, and I was going to get in the car with Jack, and he was going to meet Pat on his own. We stopped in a lay-by near the Halfway House, which is a pub restaurant on the A127. When we stopped in the lay-by, I got in the car with Jack, and Mick was going to the Halfway House. We got to the far end of the lay-by gates, and we swapped drivers. Jack was to swap the number plates. I got my feet wet. Jack was wearing overalls and wellies. I remember the wellies more than the overalls because they were new. When we stopped, Jack got out to stick the new number plates over the existing plates, but they wouldn't stick as it was too wet. I saw the number plates he was trying to stick on. They were B registration as well, and they were brand new. When the plates couldn't be stuck, they were put in the back of the car, and he said, "Drive down to the Halfway House pub." I'd been to the pub, only as a child, or driving past on the way to Southend. When we got to the pub, Jack told me to park at the back as far away from the A127 as possible, which I did. I could see Mick's Toyota parked in front of us to the left. After we parked, Jack changed his mind and said, "No, don't park here, park closer to the A127. So I moved the car. I could still see the Hilux, which was in front again but to my right. Then we had to leave the car running because the windows were misting up because of the weather. I said, "Shall we have a drink?" And Jack said no. Then he said we were waiting for Pat to arrive and to go to a meeting point. Shortly after that, he said, "Right, go." I saw a dark-coloured Range Rover when he said that. The Range Rover drove in and parked next to Mickey's Hilux. I couldn't see who was in the Range Rover. Jack then told me to drive off and up the slip road by the pub and back down the A127 to Southend. So that's what I did. Then he gave me directions down the A127 and onto the A130 to Chelmsford, I think. The A130 goes from the A127 all the way to Chelmsford, but we went to the Rettendon Turnpike, which is a roundabout with traffic lights on it. I went straight over to carry on towards Chelmsford, on the other side of the Rettendon Turnpike. I went up the hill, back down the hill and out the other side. Jack then said, "Slow down and take the next right," which I did. was a lane and not a road. Then I turned left into a gap to turn the car round. The headlamps were facing the road back towards the A130. Jack told me he'd ring me when he wanted me to pick him up. I had my mobile phone with me. He got out of the car, had a bag and a coat from the back. The bag I think was a canvas, sausage-shaped bag. I didn't notice it in the car before. I might have done, but it didn't register. He told me he'd ring me when he wanted me to come pick him up, so I pulled off and went right towards Chelmsford. I drove down the road to the first point I could turn around to a petrol station, then I drove back up the road and parked in a pub on the left-hand side of the road. I left the engine running and checked my phone to see I had a lousy signal, so I moved to get a better signal up the road. The pub I was in had a bright pink Morris Minor. I then went past the lane, up the road and took the first left. I went up that road, turned around, the first left up there, then came up and parked outside the first house on the left and waited for him to ring. I didn't wait very long. My phone rang. Jack said come and pick us up, and hung up. I think I might have said okay. I turned right, went back down the road, and had to wait for a few cars to go past so I could turn right into the lane. Then I turned the car round to face the road again. I didn't see anyone. After a short period of time, the back opened up and Jack got in. I didn't notice the interior light come on. I said, "Where's Mick?" He said he won't be a minute, he's just dropped something. Jack was sitting between the back seats talking to me. Then Mick opened the passenger door of the car and the interior light came on. When the light came on, I was looking at Jack. I noticed he had surgical gloves on and something that looked like blood. Mick said, "Turn the interior light off." Mick had just shut the door about the same time. Then he said, "Let's get going." He said, "Go left towards the Rettendon Turnpike." So I pulled out. Something clicked in my mind that something had happened. I pulled out in front of a car. Mick asked if I was okay. I said yes. And as we drove up the road towards the Rettendon Turnpike, Mick said, "They won't fuck with us no more." And Jack said, yeah, it was quite funny, because when Mick had shot one of them, the fucking gun fell apart. He kept asking me if I was okay several times. I realised what had happened, but not to who. So I said, "I hope I don't fall out with you two." Mick said, "No, you won't fall out with us, you're not like them." Mick started to hand over bits of the gun to Jack. I saw the barrels. I don't know the names of the other parts. I definitely saw the barrels. I was driving. I was a bit confused at the time. From the Rettendon Turnpike, we went back down the A130 to Southend. Then at the roar of traffic lights, I turned left, straight to the bottom of that road. We turned right and then took another right turn on or two roads later. As we went up the road, there was a pub on the right hand side, the Hungry Horse or Hungry Hippo, something like that. I drove into the car park of the pub and parked next to Mick's Toyota, which was on the left hand side, and I stopped the car. They got out and I was still sitting there. Mick had opened up his Toyota and told me to go and get in, which I did. Then they were getting changed, sort of thing. Mick was taking off his wellies, taking his overalls off over his wellies, then slipping his shoes on. Boiler suit and wellies were put in the pickup, and Jack did the same. And then we drove off. Mick drove in the Hilux with me in the passenger seat, and Jack was behind us in the Passat. We drove past the Rettendon lane, then Jack overtook us on the dual carriageway as we were driving slower. There was some conversation in the car with Mr. Steele. He said that Jack was a very cold-hearted person. I said, why? He said, well, first of all, when we stopped down the lane, a gate had been shut. So I got out of the Range Rover, I didn't know where Jack was. Then Jack went into the Range Rover and just shot all three of them. Jack handed Mick a gun, and Mick shot them. Then he said once that had happened, Jack reloaded his gun and shot them all in the back of the head. I can't recall anything else that was said. I did say, can we stop and have a drink? Mick originally said, yeah, good idea, as Mick looked shaken up. But as we got to Mark's Tate, he said best get home straight away. Then I got in my car and headed back to Braintree.